This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. This year, I watched all 50 films nominated for an Oscar, every single one. My favorite video I made last year was the one where I did this exact same challenge. It was such a blast, so I had to run it back, ranking them all from best to worst, and in the process going over which awards I think they deserve and which films are worth your precious time. Nickel Boys is up for Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay. It's my pick for both categories, obviously. It's my favorite film of 2024. It tells the story of a young man who is sent to a reform school in the Jim Crow South called Nickel Academy. The main thing you probably already know about this film is that it's shot entirely in POV, a technique I was afraid would feel gimmicky or distracting, but not only works hand in hand with the central narrative, but also feels as though it's pushing the medium forward altogether. Nickel Boys is both some of the most moving and inventive cinema I've seen in a while, and it's also a film that still feels as fresh in my mind today as it was the first day I saw it, mostly thanks to how dense it is with its themes. There is a lot to unpack with this one. I'm very surprised to see it nominated for Best Picture this year, and not for Best Cinematography, but man, I'm just glad it's here. My highest rec of the year easily. Dune Part 2 was up for Best Picture, Cinematography, Production Design, Sound, and VFX, and it's my pick for Sound and VFX. It tells the story of Paul Atreides uniting with Chani and the Fremen to protect the universe. There is a lot to love about Dune 2 because it's a big movie that shines in the details. Every technical element is handled with the utmost passion. Everyone here is working at the top of their game, and you feel that passion through the screen. It is the most technically advanced film of the year and one of the most riveting at the same time. It feels very good to know you can still see big sci-fi adventure films coming out today that feel beyond what you thought was capable. Dune Part 2 is emblematic of that movie-going experience. I don't have a whole lot else to say about it at this point. If you want to understand why it's such a big deal, specifically for its director, who should absolutely be nominated for his work, go watch my video all about him. The Brutalist is up for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Supporting Actress, Original Screenplay, Production Design, Score, Cinematography, and Editing. And it's my pick for Supporting Actor, Production Design, Score, and Cinematography. It tells the story of a visionary architect who escapes post-war Europe for the US to chase the American dream. For a story as meaty as that, the film certainly delivers. This is a sprawling American epic clocking in at well over 3 hours, the kind I thought we simply couldn't make anymore. But Brady Corbet manages to capture an entire life in this film. The ugliness, the beauty, the scale, it's all captured in gorgeous 35mm VistaVision that you can't look away from. It is cinematic excellence on full display, another example of every department working at the top of their game. As unanimously agreed upon as it is that Part 1 is better than 2, I find the messiness and flawed aspects of 2 to highlight the humanity at the center of this film. As big as The Brutalist is, it is at the end of the day a pretty intimate one with a lot of focus on its lead character. So much so that it's hard to believe that this is fiction. He really feels like a real guy. The details of that make themselves known in the second part, and it's these complicated directions it chooses to go in that keeps me coming back to this in my mind. A Real Pain is up for Best Supporting Actor and Best Original Screenplay. Really thought it'd be up for more than that. It tells the story of two cousins with opposite personalities who go on a trip to Poland together as a way of honoring their grandmother. Though I wouldn't pick it for anything it's up for, I consider this one of the sweetest movies of the year, one that's weirdly on the same page as The Brutalist, in it being the type of movie I didn't think could succeed the way it did this year. Everybody saw this thing. It has the breezy dialogue of Before Sunrise, with the calm, seemingly inconsequential hangout feel of a Jim Jarmusch movie, but what you walk away with is exactly what the title promises, a sense of realness, a real pain. Whoa! If you don't have it in you to go to therapy, watching this film is a pretty decent alternative. No Other Land is up for Best Documentary Feature. It's my pick for the award. It tells the story of the Palestinian village of Masafer Yatta and what happens when Israeli soldiers are ordered to destroy it, and it's the most devastating movie I saw in 2024. I left the theater heartbroken and overwhelmed by the fact that everything from the doc has only gotten worse since it was made. Docs of this kind that feel overwhelmingly devastating can feel hopeless, a quality this actually comments on in the actual film. In the process, it comes to terms with what a camera can mean in situations like this, the weight of capturing these atrocities and putting them on screen. Not the only time I'll say this about a doc in this video, but it was not only deeply moving, but thought-provoking as well, one of the best examples of what documentary filmmaking can achieve. I left this one with a hole in my heart. I really hope it wins the award. Anora is up for Best Picture, Director, Actress, Supporting Actor, Original Screenplay, and Editing. It's my pick for Director and Original Screenplay, and it tells the story of a sex worker who meets the son of a Russian oligarch. It's directed by Sean Baker, who is one of my favorite filmmakers working today, if you didn't know. It's definitely not Sean Baker at his weirdest or grimiest, it's definitely his most accessible, but I find that blend of his style and a more mainstream form of storytelling to be really unique and, more than anything, very entertaining. It's probably the most rewatchable film of anything on this list, a movie I'm gonna be revisiting for many years, and in that way, it's one of the year's classics, in my opinion. Very likable movie. The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent is up for Best Live Action Short Film. It's easily my pick for that category. It's about a train from Serbia to Montenegro that gets stopped by armed Serbian paramilitary forces. As I'll come to explain later, the shorts this year, specifically in this category, came off a bit on the PSA side of things. They didn't use the medium to its fullest potential. And don't get me wrong, this is pretty minimal, it's very subdued, but it does have a strong cinematic language about it that communicates the violent nature of its core narrative. It speaks more to the time we're living in than anything else in this category, the responsibilities we all have as bystanders, and the consequences for speaking up in times of need. It's a haunting short that doesn't need to say too much or spoon-feed anything for you to feel it. I was very moved by this and would love to see it win. The Substance is up for Best Picture, Director, Actress, Original Screenplay, and Hair/Makeup. It is obviously my pick for hair and makeup. If you've seen the movie, it should get this award. It's about an aging TV star who takes an experimental drug to look younger. I'm kind of shocked to be covering this in an Oscar nominations video, to be honest. It's a bonkers body horror film you rarely see recognized at prestigious award shows like this. But if anything, doesn't that just prove how great it is? How you can't deny the artistry on display? It is a bold, loud, and consistently shocking piece of horror filmmaking that I continue to get a kick out of, even after thinking it would wear off after a first viewing. It's weirdly only gotten better with repeated viewings. Watching people slowly lose their minds over this has been one of the great joys of 2024. If you haven't seen it, I am so jealous. Incident is up for Best Documentary Short. It's my pick for that category. It recounts a police shooting in Chicago using a variety of different surveillance cameras that were recording during the scene. And it's just as infuriating to watch unfold as I was expecting it to be. I left this one in a very bad mood. In that way, it's incredibly effective, but where I feel this proves its excellence is in the use of this footage. It actually ends up saying something about the world we live in today, the 24-hour surveillance and the responsibility we have to use it to our advantage, but also the control the government has over said surveillance and the grim nature of that whole thing. It is first and foremost horrifying and deeply tragic, but the approach it takes to get there is very thought-provoking and a step forward in documentary filmmaking. Conclave is up for Best Picture, Actor, Supporting Actress, Score, Adapted Screenplay, Production Design, Costume Design, and Editing. It is my pick for Best Editing. It's about a bunch of guys coming together to elect a new pope. Conclave could have been one of the stiffest nominees this year, especially coming from Edward Berger, whose last film, All Quiet on the Western Front, was a little too rigid in its filmmaking, despite being pretty impressive technically. But no, Conclave is a blast. It's like the most fun I had with any Best Picture nominee. It still holds on to that clean, intentionally sterile style Berger excels at, with great performances, interesting twists, gorgeous cinematography that should have been nominated, by the way, and an absolutely riveting script. There's just a lot to love about Conclave. Clearly, I have nothing insightful to say about it other than just look at this. How could you not love this? Sing Sing is up for Best Actor, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Original Song. It is my pick for Original Song by a landslide. And it tells the story of a man who is imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit and his involvement in a theater group for other incarcerated men. I caught the world premiere of this one all the way back at TIFF 2023, so my thoughts on this are a bit rusty. It's been a very long time since I've seen it. That's also why I keep forgetting to talk about it in the 2024 list videos that I've made. But I loved this, obviously. I say obviously obviously, because I don't know how you can't love Sing Sing. It is probably the most charming film of this award season, and that can be owed to the thick sense of community on screen. There's a lot of chemistry between these men, and it's so easy to feel it, to feel a part of it. The performances here are just excellent, especially Coleman Domingo, unsurprisingly, who actually delivers maybe my favorite performance of his. This deserves all the love. If everyone watched this film, we'd live in a better world. Soundtrack to A Coup d'etat is up for Best Documentary Feature. The film explores what led to the 1961 assassination of Congolese leader Patrice Lumumba. Soaked head to toe in jazz, this film is a thorough examination of decolonization through the lens of Africa in the 60s. It's a pretty dense film. I mean, what I've said about it so far doesn't even scratch the surface of what this thing has to offer. At times it does feel more like a video essay than what you'd normally expect from traditional documentary filmmaking, but that just goes to show how limitless this medium is. The editing gives it this rhythm that works hand in hand with the jazz. It's very easy to get lost in this film, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't learn a lot through this documentary. Not only is it very stylish, but it's also very informative. Definitely recommend checking it out. I'm Still Here is up for Best Picture, Best Actress, and Best International Feature. It's my pick for both Best International and Best Actress. It tells the story of a family living in Brazil in the 70s and what happens when the father/husband disappears suddenly. This film is carried on the back of Fernanda Torres, who delivers a gut-wrenching central performance. Her face does so much work. You watch someone slowly fall apart in front of you, and it's just moving to watch. I can't remember the last time an international performance got nominated in either category. Maybe I'm just blanking, but anyway, it's a great movie. I'm glad it's here. Definitely check it out. A Different Man is up for Best Hair and Makeup. It's about a man who undergoes a radical medical procedure to drastically transform his appearance and what happens when he begins to regret that choice. Those who wanted more substance out of the substance will go crazy for this, as I feel this goes a bit deeper on those themes of self-hatred, beauty standards, and how we're perceived by the people around us. It also shares a lot of the same traits as something like Dream Scenario, at least tonally, and how it goes about this narrative using absurdism. It's a hard one to pin down if you can't tell. It has such a blend of tones and pulls from so many different styles and eras of filmmaking. It's kind of its own beast altogether, but it's this unique quality that makes it endlessly charming and anything but forgettable. Very strange movie. I think most people would get a kick out of it. The Seed of the Sacred Fig is up for Best International Feature. It follows a family living in Tehran and what happens when the father loses his gun somewhere in the house. This, like I'm Still Here, does an incredible job building chemistry amongst its central family. In the first 15 minutes, they do such a great job establishing the relationship that I felt like I was just a part of the group at one point. What's brilliant, though, is how this film slowly morphs itself from this docu-style realism into a cut-and-dry thriller, to the point of there being chase scenes, car chases, shootouts. It's a very clever film in that way, about how relationships, even those within a family, can be torn apart and the influence the government has on that breakage. It's made even more thought-provoking after you consider the conditions this film was made and how everyone risked their lives to get this out there. It's a very brave film in that way. And I was afraid the film would rely too much on the making of to make it work and to make it interesting, but the film itself is just incredibly riveting, very special. Definitely check it out. Better Man is up for Best VFX. It's a biopic for British pop icon Robbie Williams, the twist being that he's a monkey for some goddamn reason. But I'm not asking too many questions because I think that choice is incredible, and the movie happens to be pretty great too. Listen, man, I feel like a broken record, but these biopics, they're getting out of hand for sure. But between this and A Complete Unknown, there is a feeling amongst filmmakers that to make these stories work, you have to go hard with it. And Better Man goes so unbelievably hard, I'm smiling just thinking about it. Some of the most confident directing I saw all year, great music that the film does justice to, some gorgeous VFX. I forgot that he was a monkey after a while. That's crazy. Better Man represents doing it for the love of the game. If we're not gonna go 110% with it the way they did here, what's even the point? Magic Candies is up for Best Animated Short Film. It is my pick for that category, and it's about a child who discovers that his bag of candies gives him special powers. This had a very Coraline thing about it, the way it jumped through different vignettes with each candy, and I really loved that aspect. You really see the world through this child's eyes. All the things you used to fantasize about seeing as a kid are experienced in this short film. It's very sweet. Flow is up for Best International and Best Animated Feature. It's my pick for Best Animated, and it tells the story of a little cat who goes on a crazy adventure after its home is affected by a sudden flooding. This is not only adorable from front to back, but it's also a deeply atmospheric film that I was really captivated by. No dialogue, a pretty thin plot, yet for whatever reason you immediately care so deeply for this cat. Probably because of how well animated it is. Not only is the style a step forward for the medium, but the movement of the animals is very impressive. Not to mention, in times like these, after having the most panicky January of my entire life here in LA, something about a changing world increasing your sense of community but decreasing your sense of place really hit. Beautiful Men is up for Best Animated Short. It tells the story of three brothers who go to Turkey to get a hair transplant, and this has been getting an absurd amount of hate over on The Boxed, and I'm just like, listen, man, if you don't get it, you don't get it. But I thought this tapped into a weird and depressing element of the male experience that I haven't really seen before. Not sure how to expand on it. It is weird in the way Lynch films are weird. Very vulnerable stuff, but I was moved by this. I really enjoyed it, surprisingly. Instruments of a Beating Heart is up for Best Documentary Short. In a year of cute nominees, this might take the cake for cutest. This short is about a bunch of first graders in Tokyo putting together a musical performance of Ode to Joy, and I really enjoyed watching this. Most will say there's not much to it, but I thought the way the camera just kind of took a step back and let us observe this process, all the highs and the lows, made for a very enjoyable watch. This first grade music performance shit is no joke, man. Is life and death up there. Porcelain War is up for Best Documentary Feature. It follows a group of artists in Ukraine who are forced to fight for their country. And man, was I charmed by this. Talk about making a case for art and why we need it. It feels these days, even in America, that art is pushed aside, like we're in a culture drought, which we aren't, but damn does it feel like it some days. And this little doc really proves how important it is to keep something like that alive. The doc isn't just saying this either, it's acting in it in real time. This thing is full of Ukrainian culture, music, sculptures, paintings, you name it. The docs this year are devastating and could leave you feeling hopeless. This one certainly centers around grim subject matter, but damn is the light in this one very bright. Really needed this energy in the doc selection this year. The Girl with the Needle is up for Best International Feature. It follows a woman who discovers an underground abortion clinic in post-World War I Copenhagen. Shot in gorgeous black and white cinematography, this film is a technical marvel. And usually when I say stuff like that about films of this subject matter, you may think the film will come off a bit too bleak and ambiguous, but the narrative here is pretty riveting. It pulls off a bit of a miracle by punching you in the gut basically every 10 minutes, but keeps you thinking there's some sense of hope, a reason to keep going. A very nuanced quality that made this one of my favorite surprises from this marathon. Nosferatu is up for Best Cinematography, Costume Design, Production Design, and Hair and Makeup, and it's my pick for Best Costume Design. It's the latest remake of Nosferatu, this one being by Robert Eggers, and even if this is probably my least favorite Eggers film to date, that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. The production design is so detailed and well researched, every room is so lived in. Lily Rose Depp is delivering probably my favorite performance of hers. The screenplay deserved a bit more love in my opinion, just as well researched and full of personality. In other words, it's another Robert Eggers movie. He's one of my most trusted filmmakers at this point. I know he's going to deliver every single time. I just wish he had surprised me a bit more with this one. I was just slightly let down by it. A Complete Unknown is up for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Supporting Actress, Adapted Screenplay, Sound, and Costume Design. It's my pick for Best Actor, and it tells the story of Bob Dylan's rise to fame and his choice to go electric and leave behind the movement that gave him his start. This movie has grown on me a lot since seeing it. It does fall into pretty safe biopic tropes, but I find the ideas at the center of it to be a bit meatier to chew on than I gave it credit for initially. The idea of abandoning a movement in a sense, but for your own artistic fulfillment, is a pretty thorny thing to navigate, an interesting dilemma to explore now specifically in a political climate where so many people feel torn as to how far they're willing to take their beliefs before jumping ship. That all may be a bit of a stretch as a read for the Bob Dylan biopic movie, but it's this film's wide open style of storytelling that lets you wander through what it might really mean, an aspect I find pretty admirable for a genre known to suffocate itself in its own formula. Yuck is up for Best Animated Short Film. It's about a young boy who, after making fun of adults who kiss, begins to feel the desire to kiss himself. Not kiss himself, but to kiss, you know. The film communicates that feeling through this glowing pink sparkly thing, a technique I thought was really fun. They use this already clever technique in other clever ways, like a sequence where all the tents begin to have a pink glow at night. It comes off weird on paper, but in the movie, it's very sweet. Of the shorts this year, this may just be the most straightforward, but it's the kind of sweet, sugary, animated short I always look forward to seeing when I check out these nominations every year. Very cute. Sugarcane is up for Best Documentary Feature, the final film I checked off on this challenge, and it follows an investigation into the abuse and missing children at an Indian residential school in Canada. What immediately stands out about Sugarcane is how calm and quiet it is in its presentation. A tone I wasn't expecting for something this devastating, but in hindsight, it makes complete sense. The crimes that are at the center of this film are not only devastating, but they feel like they've lacked closure, justice. And through a more meditative, borderline spiritual approach, you get this feeling of emptiness that the community feels. For a film consisting mostly of moments of community, but also investigation, it could come off fairly straightforward and dry, but this is anything but. It's a warm film that gets you to not only understand at a deeper level the history of this community, but also who they are today. The Wild Robot is up for Best Animated Feature, Best Sound, and Best Score, way more than I was expecting. It follows a robot that crashes onto an island full of wildlife and what happens when it finds a connection with a baby goose. This is directed by Chris Sanders, who also did How to Train Your Dragon. I bring that up because he clearly has some sauce when it comes to capturing environments. This and the Dragon films really invite you into their worlds pretty vividly. The first 20 minutes of this is some of my favorite filmmaking of the year, just watching this robot navigate the harsh conditions of this island with little to no dialogue. It's breathtaking. And the animation here is gorgeous. I like this trend of studios realizing the concept art is the way to go with the final product. It looks great. The longer the film goes on, the more it starts to turn into a formulaic animated film for families. I get it, they had to turn it into that, I guess. But I still really enjoyed this and would love to see whatever this style of animation is become a norm. Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul is up for Best Animated Feature. It follows the classic duo as they face off against Wallace's new smart gnome, who has a mind of its own. I love The Wild Robot, clearly, as I just talked about it before this, but it's a little funny that it's nominated the same year as this. A film pretty critical of robots, AI, all that jazz. Robots used to be a harmless thing I didn't read too deep into, but these days it really means something. And leave it to Wallace and Gromit to do it in a way that's not corny at all. Very funny and endlessly charming. Wonderful animation, wonderful gags. Everything about this one makes me smile. It's probably not as good as Were-Rabbit, to be honest, but there really is no such thing as a bad Wallace and Gromit film. In the Shadow of the Cypress is up for Best Animated Short Film, and even if it's not my favorite of the shorts overall, I think it's my favorite style of animation of the bunch. So many gorgeous textures, beautiful use of light, incredible framing. This style teeters on coming off like whatever this style is called, but it never does. It just looks great. This is one of those where, although I wasn't entirely there 100% of the time with the narrative, I felt it pretty strongly, kind of like that other one from last year. A bit too watery for my taste, not just because of all the water, but still well worth your time, I would say. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is up for Best VFX. It's the first film in this new post-Caesar trilogy of Planet of the Apes films, and it follows a young ape who goes on a journey that questions his beliefs. When I was writing this, trying to think of what exactly happened in this film, that's kind of the best I could come up with. It's a very watery plot, lots of world building, which I kind of loved. These films have always felt like they existed in rich, expansive worlds that always felt unexplored. So to see one really lean into that aspect was pretty cool, especially when the VFX are that good. Is it a little sleepy? Yeah, definitely. I'd even say it's a tad forgettable, but I respect the approach they had for this. It keeps it from being on my bad side. Alien Romulus is up for Best VFX. It's the latest film in the Alien franchise and follows a group of young space colonizers who end up on a ship with some pretty crazy things going on. There's aliens on it. I have to be honest, I liked this a lot more than I was expecting to. Not only does it look incredible, lots of deep shadows and vibrant reds, the VFX definitely deserve a nomination too. The performances are a bit hit or miss, but the standout is Daniel Johnson, who is at this point one of my favorite new actors. I thought he brought a lot of personality to this cast. I think because I'm so detached to the Alien franchise, to the point of not knowing what was played for crowd pleasing, I didn't have as much of a problem with those aspects that people have been bringing up. My only real issues were that it had some real dead air moments where it was doing nothing remotely interesting for a while, and it feels like it ends about 20 different times before the credits roll. Pretty weird movie, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. Inside Out 2 is up for Best Animated Feature. It's the follow-up to Pixar's classic Inside Out, and it follows Riley as she enters middle school and has to navigate a bunch of new, more intense emotions. On paper, that sounds like a pretty predictable and phoned-in premise for an Inside Out sequel, but this works a lot better than you might think. It explores anxiety and how we have to control our emotions in a way even I found really insightful as a 27-year-old man. It shares the same issues I've always had with Inside Out in bordering on feeling like a PSA, but emphasis on the word border. I wouldn't say it ever goes over the edge with that, thankfully. My biggest issue with this is the brain rot pace of it, moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour for no goddamn reason. Trust that the animation and the emotions are enough for kids to enjoy this. We don't need to lean into ruining attention spans even more than we already are. The Apprentice is up for Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. It's a Donald Trump biopic that follows his early years and his relationship with Roy Cohn. This I had no idea what to think of before going into it, but I came out pleasantly surprised. It never feels corny, which speaks to how impressive Stan's performance is. He captures Trump's behavior and his aura, but doesn't worry about the details in his voice, which works so well and never comes off comical. Jeremy Strong is operating on another level entirely. He disappears into this role in a pretty unsettling way. I love the bold stylistic choices like going to a hyper-digital look in the back half. There are a handful of low-hanging fruit moments here for sure, and I do wish it was longer so that it could go even deeper on certain aspects of his rise to power. But at the end of the day, I was just really fascinated by this thing. It stayed with me for a while too. Wander to Wonder is up for Best Animated Short Film. It follows 3 puppet people things that are left alone in their studio after their creator passes away. It's a very dark film, if you can't tell, with a pretty bizarre sense of humor. I want to compare it to Don't Ug Me, I'm Scared, but it's also sort of its own beast entirely. Love the stop motion, it looks incredible as always, and I find it really thought-provoking in 2 ways. One, looking at it from the perspective of the puppets and how it feels for your creator to die, what you even exist for at that point. That stuff is pretty cool. And 2, from the creator's perspective, the idea that your art will literally live on and, in a sense, survive, that's pretty moving. It meanders a bit here and there and maybe doesn't stick the landing in a way I was on board with, but man, is it conceptually very cool. Black Box Diaries is up for Best Documentary Feature. It follows a journalist who investigates her own sexual assault and, in the process, how she exposes Japan's outdated judicial system. This is an unsurprisingly heavy doc. The longer it goes on, the more infuriating it is to see how long it takes for this woman to find closure or justice in this process. But in that way, I found it very insightful in the way Japan goes about cases like this. It's pretty frustrating. It's also a really interesting time capsule into the birth of the Me Too movement, an era some might have forgotten was a pretty major shift, not just in the US, but clearly everywhere else. In fact, I'd say it's one of the most comprehensive looks into that movement that I've seen, and a reminder of how much progress still needs to be made today. I'm Not a Robot is up for Best Live-Action Short Film. It has one of my favorite premises of this list. A woman thinks she might be a robot after continuously failing a CAPTCHA test. The camera work is really sleek and engaging. The central performance sells the thriller aspects of this very well, but I'd be lying if I said this doesn't run in circles with its premise a bit too much. It has such a good thing going for it, and it gets you there immediately. It just doesn't go anywhere as interesting after the fact. Death by Numbers is up for Best Documentary Short. It follows Samantha Fuentes, a survivor of the horrific Parkland shooting, as she prepares to confront her shooter. This is the second doc feature nominated this year that explores justice, hatred, and closure from a pretty extreme perspective, this being the much stronger example. I'll get to the other doc in a second, but what moved me about this was how mature Fuentes had to be for her age. You rarely see how victims of these events move forward years later, and this film finds its subject at a really fascinating time in her life and explores these existential feelings pretty thoroughly. Wicked is up for Best Picture, Actress, Supporting Actress, Costume Design, Production Design, Editing, Hair and Makeup, Score, Sound, and VFX. It is my pick for Supporting Actress, and it tells the story of how Elphaba and Glinda met and how their friendship turned into who we know them as today. As you may know, I never got on the Wicked train. I was never head over heels about this thing, mostly because of the stale direction, dull colors, and excessive runtime. I probably would have forgave the runtime had it been more my thing. I'm sure many people opposite of me would say all the same things about Dune 2. But that said, I can still see the appeal here. The musical numbers are great. The 2 central performances are a total blast, clearly Ariana is my pick for the award. She was amazing in this movie, and I'm genuinely excited for the next film based on how much better the film got when they showed up to Oz. I think they're gonna lock in ways we haven't seen since, well, March of 2024. Anuja is up for Best Live Action Short Film. It's about a girl working in a sweatshop who is offered the chance to attend school. I thought this was very cute and fairly uplifting for its really tragic subject matter. It follows in the footsteps of The Florida Project and seeing a tragic world through the eyes of a child, and it works in that way. I just found its on-the-nose approach to work against the film's emotional weight. I was frustrated by how much I didn't really care by the end of the film, even when the subject is that devastating. Memoir of a Snail is up for Best Animated Feature. It is, well, a memoir, not about a snail, but about a young woman who overcomes a series of very unfortunate events. Told through lovely stop motion, Sarah Snook voice acting, and tons of witty adult humor, you'd think this would land for me, but I really struggled with this one. I was shockingly out of sync with whatever this was trying to do. The humor is silly, but a little repetitive. Sarah Snook's performance also started to sound like the same delivery and rhythm over and over again. The memoir formula made it so I never really had a grasp on what exactly the story was. I mean, maybe I just went into this with the wrong expectations, but this was almost too cold and too miserable that, sorry, I couldn't really care about anything going on. It made me feel like just because you're using stop motion in a quirky tone and it has a nice warm ending doesn't mean I have to automatically call this a good movie. It's pretty clunky for the most part. Really wish I liked this more, as there is plenty to appreciate about it from the outside. A. Lien is up for Best Live Action Short Film. It tells the story of a young couple navigating the immigration process on the day of the husband's green card interview. For many reasons, this is a hard watch, the subject matter being what it is. Watching it in a time like now, the choice to shoot it in an anxiety-inducing way, not unlike something from the Safdie brothers, the whole thing just made me really uncomfortable, intentionally so, which is why I can't not call this a success. I just wish the script wasn't so on the nose to the point of it coming off like, again, a video they'd show you in school. A tiny, arguably tedious complaint when you consider the strong emotions this brought out of me, but it's an issue that never really went away, even at the film's finest moments. The Last Ranger is up for Best Live Action Short Film. It's about a young girl in South Africa who befriends a ranger, the last one in fact, who aims to protect the rhinos and what happens when they encounter a group of poachers. This is a nominated short film with a crazy twist, one that opens up an entirely new can of worms completely separate from the central narrative. I really do connect with this film's beliefs. Obviously, fuck anyone trying to kill rhinos, but the short felt a bit like it was on autopilot mode up until that twist. Dare I say it was relying on that moment to give it any sort of oomph? And in my opinion, that just wasn't the most interesting way for this film to get where it wanted to go. Gladiator 2 is up for Best Costume Design. That's it? It's just that? I really thought this would be up for more than that given everything about it. It's the follow-up to Ridley Scott's classic Gladiator film, and in many ways, it is riding the shit out of that film's coattails. So many moments that feel like it's just trying to please fans, give everyone a they don't make them like they used to moment, but instead coming off kind of dull and uninspired. As I've said a million times by now though, Denzel is pretty incredible in it, same with Fred Hetchinger. It passes the time in a relatively entertaining way. Honestly, it is the airplane movie of the season. It probably goes hard up in the sky. Only problem is you probably won't remember what happened by the time you land. September 5 is up for Best Original Screenplay. It's a retelling of the 1972 Munich Olympics where a group of Israeli athletes were held hostage by a group of Palestinian terrorists. Despite its premise, which is really a minefield, this makes it out pretty clean as a solid thriller. John Magaro is excellent as always. The editing is going nutso. I'll say it's one of those that makes you think, mostly about live TV, journalism, and the ethics within that field. At what point are you doing more harm than good? It's a hard thing to figure out. Unfortunately, it just kind of throws these questions out there and doesn't really choose to explore them all that thoroughly. It's a film I actually would have liked to see expanded beyond what it sets itself up as. What happened the next day or the next month? That's, I feel, where the meat of the character development was. But I'm not here to pitch a better movie. I'm here to review this one, and this one was fine. Maria is up for Best Cinematography. It's a Pablo Larraín biopic about a real-life icon that gets a little weird sometimes. No way. I'm sorry. It's about the opera singer Maria Callas and what went down in her final days. It stars Angelina Jolie, a pivotal aspect to bring up as that and the cinematography might be the only reasons anyone would tune into this. I love Pablo Larraín, but he's really just phoning it in here. Everything about this is weirdly predictable, making for a downright boring time. Jolie is good and fine, but again, a bit on the expected side. It's giving Bradley Cooper and Maestro. We get it. We all know what you're trying to do here. Yes, it looks gorgeous in the cinematography department, but as we all know too well by now, that's not even close to enough these days. The Only Girl in the Orchestra is up for Best Documentary Short. It follows Oren O'Brien, the first woman to become a member of the New York Philharmonic. While that's an undeniably impressive feat, and on paper she seems like a colorful enough subject to make a whole doc about, it's clear not even she feels like her story is interesting enough to justify all this. Maybe if this had been a lot shorter, it'd work a lot better, but the longer you sit in this, the more you're like, okay, it hasn't said anything new or worthwhile in a second. I needed an easygoing doc short just as much as the next guy after this year's selections, but this is proof that sometimes those docs aren't recognized because, well, there's just not enough to them. Elton John Never Too Late is up for Best Original Song. It's a documentary about Elton John getting ready to perform his final North American show, and in the process looking back at his life and career. And man, we did not need this. I'll just come out and say it. We really don't need this movie. I would have rather just had a full-on concert film, not a boring version of Rocket Man, which just came out a few years ago. I don't really get what the thought process was here. It doesn't even feel like you ever get that close to Elton John. He doesn't open up in ways you haven't already seen in other places. I love Elton John, man, but damn. Pretty big waste of time here. I Am Ready, Warden is up for Best Documentary Short. It follows a few people, a man who is on death row, his mother, his son, as well as the son of the man he murdered. A lot going on here, a lot of big ideas, uncomfortable ideas, and the filmmakers get up close and personal with it. At times, maybe a little too close, in ways that feel a tad unethical. Specifically the stuff with the main subject's son, who is clearly undergoing a deeply traumatic experience at a formative time in his life, and seems lost in a way the film doesn't feel all that concerned with. It's a tragic situation for everyone involved, and the film chooses to spend the most time empathizing with the man behind it all, whose perspective is interesting on paper but difficult to dive deeper into, especially when everyone around him has so much to offer. Lots of big questions being asked about what is right, what's wrong, barely any of them being answered. It's just a tricky doc that left me very, very frustrated. The 6888 is up for Best Original Song because, of course, Diane Warren made it in. Set in World War II, the film follows 855 women who are assigned to fix a 3-year backlog of undelivered mail. It's directed by Tyler Perry, who, is just not very good at directing this kind of story. It's very much on the serious side, much more serious than a Medea Homecoming, and it looks like something off the Hallmark Channel. Really flat lighting, cheesy-ass performances. It actually looks like a parody of what people think an Oscar bait film is. The kicker being it actually did get nominated at the Oscars. I hesitate to go that hard on it because the story is genuinely pretty interesting, dare I say, even a little moving. But the execution here is a failure in pretty much every single way. It's not even serviceable, it's just bad. It's also well over 2 hours, making it a true chore to get through. And lastly, Emilia Perez is up for Best Picture, Director, Actress, Supporting Actress, Adapted Screenplay, Cinematography, Editing, Score, Original Song, Hair, Makeup, Sound, and International Feature Film. It's the final Best Picture nominee on this list. It's the final nominee on this list altogether, and it tells the story of a Mexican cartel boss who wishes to transition into a woman. It seems a bit extreme and overdramatic to put Emilia Perez last on this list. I didn't actually think I would do this back when I first saw it, and when I put the list together for the first time, this wasn't even last. But when I looked at the list of films this year, I really do see Emilia Perez as the biggest failure of them all, even if it's not a total dud. Every other film has an angle you can look at them at, where something about it works. Even the 6888 can be interesting on paper. I Am Ready, Warden has a lot of interesting questions. Elton John, Never Too Late. Elton John is a good guy to watch. Emilia Perez, nothing works. No matter how you look at this movie, nothing about it is even close to exceptional, let alone worthy of the praise it's received this award season. Again, the direction may not be offensively bad. The editing isn't terrible. The acting, I'd argue, is borderline decent, but nothing is hitting it out of the park here, which only makes its shortcomings that much more obvious and troublesome. That's just how I feel about it from a surface level, from a technical standpoint. The way it approaches its themes is incredibly incurious and borderline regressive. It's offensively surface level in its depiction of Mexican culture. It's a laughably out-of-touch take on transness, and for some stupid-ass French reason, it's a musical. And the music is bad, man. You've seen the penis and vagina shit. It sucks. So for those reasons, I kind of had to put it last. This thing pisses me off the more I've sat with it. I have to admit, had this been just a blip in the year that we all moved on from, an overly ambitious crime drama that didn't land on its feet that happened to premiere at Cannes, I'd probably not feel this strongly about it. I'd probably just brush it off my shoulder. But seeing it get one award after another for doing what exactly? Sorry, but the Carla Sofia Gascon tweets left a terrible taste in my mouth that have unfortunately affected my thoughts on the film. I don't know. It makes me very excited for this award season to wrap itself up. We should just move on from Emilia Perez altogether. And on that note, I think that's my cue. 50 Oscar-nominated films in the books. Thank you to the Oscars Death Race subreddit for helping out a ton with this one. I would not have found most of these films if not for that subreddit. And hey, what's your favorite Oscar-nominated film this year? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Go watch these films and form your own opinions, and before you head out. I do want to thank this week's sponsor, Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Squarespace recently introduced Design Intelligence, which combines 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential. It empowers anyone to build a beautiful, more personalized website tailored to their unique needs that they can use to enhance their entire online presence. Squarespace makes it super easy to connect social and multimedia accounts in just a few clicks with icons, direct links, or embedded feeds, allowing you to build visitor trust while updating content only where you need it, extending your brand's footprint. You can even sell content on Squarespace. Did you know that? Because you can. They make it super easy to sell access to your content, no matter what it is. Online courses, blogs, videos, even memberships. Earn recurring revenue by gating your content behind a paywall. Simply set the price and choose whether to charge a one-time fee or subscription for access. Head to squarespace.com to start your free trial. And when you're ready to launch that website, go to squarespace.com/Karsten to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.